In the Christmas story, the baby Jesus is born to his parents, Mary and Joseph, not in a hospital or even a house, but in a stable, because there was no other place for them. I think about that stable sometimes, and I remember the barns that I've been in. Have you ever been in a barn at night? Yeah, you've been in a barn at night? Well, in a barn at night, there are cows and goats sitting in the hay and quietly chewing their cud. And there are chickens up in the rafters, fluffed up against the cold, looking down, and sometimes they'll stand up and they'll turn around and they'll sit back down again. And there are big horses and little donkeys with long ears. And there are mice deep under the hay. Every barn, there's mice. You never really see them, but they're there. Though there is usually somewhere a cat watching quietly, watching more with its ears than with its eyes, and swishing its tail. And maybe there's a lamp hanging overhead or a little light, but in a barn at night, the whole place is dark and warm and quietly alive. Well, in the Christmas story, on the hills outside of town, high above this barn, are sheep and shepherds. And the sheep are in their winter wool, and they're laying one right up next against each other. And the shepherds looking after them are wrapped up against the cold at night, right there in among the flock. And for them, the barn is a distant spot of light, way far away. But then above even the shepherd and the sheep, on the sharp hills, on the moonlit hills, among the old dry rocks, are the dark shadows of wolves. And the story goes that on that Christmas night, wolves didn't gather to hunt. They had other work to do then. And here and there on the hills, they paused to sit still a while in pairs, or parents and pups, or big old families or solitary ones. And here and there across that lean landscape, they gathered to howl together, to sing to each other for the joy of it. Have you heard wolves howl before? Will you howl? Mm-hmm. In those howls, the wolves are telling each other, just like you're telling each other, they're saying, "We are here." They were howling to tell each other, "You're not alone." They were howling to their children to say, "Come back to us." They were howling to their parents to say, "Join us." They were howling to the ones they missed to say, "We miss you." And they were howling to their little pups to say, "Wherever you are in the night, follow our voice home." They were howling between the hills to call to each other and reassure each other, to tell each other, "We're here, we're not alone." Down in the barn, below the hills, below the sheep and the shepherds, down in the barn, the cows lay up against the wall and rested their heads. And the goats slept, one leaning up against the other where they were sitting. And the chickens on the rafter closed their eyes and tucked their heads into their feathers. And the horses let their heads droop down low. And the cat, at last in the warm corner, slept curled up, and deep below the hay, the mice slept in a little furry pile, one on top of the other. And the parents of the little baby in that place, the one who had been born right there in the stable, they slept too, but the child, held in the crook of his mother's arm, he was awake and looking out into the great night with wide eyes and listening to the howl of wolves. He heard the breathing of the animals around him and the wind moving over the barn and the creaking of the building as it settled at night. But in the stillness of all things, while everyone around him slept, he heard a noise drifting down from the sharp and moonlit hills above town, so faint. And listening to them, he had no words, but knew they meant the same thing as his mother's arm wrapped around him did. We are here. You are not alone. Not tonight. Not ever.